All right, welcome back, everybody. Did everybody have a nice lunch? Hope you got a quick break, stepped away from your computer, maybe got some water, something to eat. I don't know about you. I took my dog for a walk around the block because he was just outside my door waiting patiently for me to come out of this session. So thank you all for joining us. Please make sure you are on mute and please make sure you have your chat open because I'll be asking you lots of questions in the chat. And so I want to hear from you. This is meant to be an interactive session. So if you have not been in my previous sessions, again, my name is Risa Fickett. I'm a senior project manager in the Enterprise Project Management Office here at San Diego County Office of Education. So again, please take out your lovely handy dandy printed copy of the conference map if you haven't already done so. And if you don't already have it, please feel free to click this beautiful little download button here and it'll take you right to it so you can download that. This afternoon, we're going to be conquering Closure Castle. And we're going to revisit this map at the end of our session to kind of check off and see how we're doing on these areas. So our lessons learned, stakeholder survey, final report, celebration, and our sign off with our sponsor. So who's ready to get started? Right? All right. Awesome. Here we go. Okay. So in this session today, the reason you all are here is because we're going to talk about the closure phase, right? So in this session, we're going to talk about lessons learned, conducting a survey, creating that final report or presentation for your sponsor or your steering committee. And then, like the most fun part, actually having a celebration to celebrate the success of your project. And then finally, the sign off with your sponsor. So this right here, what we're showing you is just a checklist that you can use when it's time to close out your project and to kind of help guide you through the process. So these are the items that we recommend that you consider each time you wrap up a project. So remember, when you build your project plan at the beginning of your project, you want to make sure you allot plenty of time for closure or this closure phase at the end of your project. A lot of times, I don't know if this happens to you, please raise your hand or give me a thumbs up if you are finishing one project and it's boom on to the next project and you really don't often take that time to kind of like do the lessons learned and celebrate the success. Yes, right? All these thumbs and all these hands. Yes, you all know what I'm talking about. So we're going to walk you through kind of how to do these things, but it's really up to you all to then build these into your project plans moving forward. All right. So let's talk a little bit about a lessons learned session. So I just wanted to do a quick check-in with you guys in the chat. How many of you conduct lessons learned? So give me a thumbs up or raise your hand if you do lessons learned now. All right, a few, right? Okay, so we have, Barb, how many people we got in this meeting right now?
135.
Okay, so out of 135, I'm going to guess we're, maybe a third of us are doing lessons learned right now, right? So this might be an opportunity for some folks to pick up some new things that they can build into their projects. So let's take a look at this quote on the left-hand side of the screen. So what we learn becomes a part of who we are. And we want to get better at what we do, right? So in IT, we're always striving for that continuous improvement. We're always trying to do things quicker, faster, better, smarter, right? Cheaper. So our lessons learned meeting, we really want to discuss with all of our project team members the important issues that will help improve our quality, our value, our workflow, how speedily we complete things, how efficiently, we spend our time and our money. And then also just that team synergy, that we want to take into our next project. So when I personally run my lessons learned, I try to make sure that everybody knows that this is for the team's improvement and to improve the project. It should be a very safe space. And we want to focus on the future. So we want to be future focused and focus on solutions, not just the problems. So if there's something that didn't go well, we want to think of not just what went wrong, but how we're going to improve it for next time. So again, just being mindful of the safe space that you want to create before you engage in these lessons learned, because some people might be scared to come into a lessons learned thinking that they might get attacked or it's just going to be negative and all about the problems. And so we really want to help guide it towards solutioning, right? So like I said before, you don't want your stand-up times to be about solutions, but you do want your lessons learned to be solutions oriented. So the information that you gather from your lessons learned session can be summarized and shared in your final report for your sponsor, your steering committee, your stakeholders, kind of whoever you want to share it with, might be your board. This can be done at the end of a phase, the end of milestones, or really at any point in your project. It doesn't just have to be at the end, and it doesn't have to be a huge time commitment. Once you get in the flow, it can really be a quick 15-minute check-in just to see how did that phase go or how did this go. As a project manager, you also want to keep a running list of areas to be improved. So I always have a little notepad on my, my desk, kind of keeping track of stuff I want to make sure I include in our lessons learned. And again, if you aren't already doing this, this is a great thing that's really easy to incorporate. So let's talk a little bit about lessons learned and some sample questions that we like to ask our project teams when we do our lessons learned. The first two are pretty standard, so what worked well? It's always good to start with the positive, right? Any managers out there who have to give feedback to teams? Yep. What you always start with? The positive, right? So start with the positive. What worked well? What are people, what worked well in the project? What are people happy about? How things that went well? Question two, where can we improve, right? So it's not what went wrong, but how can we improve? So again, even phrasing the question, you can kind of help guide the direction it goes. So it's not that we don't want to talk about issues, we just want to frame it in a way that is forwarding to the conversation. So we want to bring up issues in a way that we can focus on improving them rather than just kind of getting mired down in what went wrong. And then the third question that we like to ask, yeah, I just saw in the chat, same for parent conferences, bingo. Third question that we've been using and we've had a lot of success with is, what are you most proud of as a result of this project? It really gives your project team members an opportunity to kind of shine a light on the things that really made them happy. What we're finding in those sessions is we're hearing a lot about the collaboration and the teamwork, and it kind of helps build that morale that you can take into the next project. Third question could also be anything else that you'd like to know from your team members. So if you have a different question that you'd like to ask in your lessons learned, go ahead and put it in chat and share it with the rest of the group. All right. So a little bit about conducting the actual lessons learned meeting. So if you're going to run a lessons learned meeting, here's the process that we like to suggest. So before the meeting, you want to make sure that you tell the project team how to prepare. So I provide the 3 questions in advance and ask them to come to the meeting ready to respond to those questions. I might actually take that back. I might provide them those questions in a worksheet already and have them pre-fill it out and be prepared to share. So for example, if I've got a testing team of 5 different people, I might not have them all share out at the meeting. I may choose one representative to share out for the whole testing team. All right, during the meeting, facilitation is important. You really want to make sure you're clear about the purpose, how you're going to run it. Is it going to be a round robin or questions? And it's really important to make sure that everybody's feedback is captured. So whether it's in the document, I don't recommend recording lessons learned sessions. Again, you want to create that safe space. But you do want to get everybody's feedback, maybe into the document. And then after the meeting, quick question for you guys. What do you think we should do with those? So we collected all this feedback from the lessons learned. Go ahead and in your chat, tell me, what do you think we should do with those lessons learned? What would you do with them? So you got all this great feedback for your team, then what? Yes, document. Yes. Use them to guide future projects. Absolutely. Yes, use them for improvement. Implement in the next project. Yes. Yes, archive. Modify accordingly. Yeah. All great suggestions. Modify my charter to avoid in future. Yes. Yes, make sure there's an action plan to integrate them in the next project. Yes, because that's the other challenge is you might archive it and then 2 years later you're doing the same project or a similar project and you're like, wait, didn't we have some lessons learned from the last time we did this, right? So how do you pull that back out and then incorporate it into your next project? Absolutely. Great suggestions, you guys. All right. So, just a second. There we go. Yay. Okay, let's talk about surveys. So another question for you in the chat. Have y'all ever taken a bad survey? You took the survey and it just left a bad taste in your mouth. So in the chat, tell me what made it bad? Like what left a bad taste in your mouth from a survey you took? Could be a survey for anything. Yeah, so too many questions, poor timing, deceptively long. I love that. The phrasing, the length, wasn't clear or vague. Yeah, all great suggestions. Yep. Negatively worded, generic, leading questions. Uh-huh. long answers, negative questions, yeah. Unclear, yes, absolutely. So clearly you all have taken some bad surveys in your life. You're definitely demonstrating that. Questions unrelated to the project, yeah, absolutely. So we want to spend a little bit of time thinking about how we can write better surveys. So uh, we're going to take a look at a real world example from a project we executed here at San Diego County. This is the project charter for our ServiceNow education project. So here's what we set out to achieve, right? Our objectives and success criteria from our charter. So we said all employees would be involved and would know what to expect. Our job aids and videos would be clear. More employees would know how to access, in this case, ServiceNow and enter their tickets. And we'd see a decrease in the number of like backdoor requests, right? And new employees would be able to hear about ServiceNow at onboarding. So for the first three items, we could find this out using a survey, right? It was a great, easy way to collect information to make sure we met those objectives. Not everything can be accessed in the survey. So for example, for the fourth item, sorry, let me go back. For the fourth item, decrease in number of emails, phone numbers, phone calls, etc. We couldn't do a survey for that. So instead we collected metrics from our help desk team to track 4 weeks of metrics before our go live to make sure we had a baseline, and then we could compare after we implemented the project to the baseline. And then for the fifth item, that new employees would be exposed, we just literally worked with our HR department to ensure we included that information in our new hire orientations. So again, beginning with the end in mind, figuring out what you want to capture in your charter makes it a lot easier to make sure you're asking the right questions when it comes down to the end of your project to creating that survey. So let's take a little look at the types of questions that you might ask in your survey. So it's likely that you've heard of this word quantitative, which just makes you think of numbers. And we ask quantitative questions on our survey. And these are questions that are scaled like on a scale of 1 to 4, where 1 might be strongly disagree and 4 is strongly agree, or true, false, or yes, no. Those are closed-ended questions where people have to enter a value. So the benefit of quantitative questions is that there's a measurable, and in the end, you can create statistics or graphs or charts. So you can say 98% of people agree that our job aid was clear and concise and easy to follow. So on the screen, you see an example of 4 different questions we asked our fellow employees at the end of our ServiceNow project. So, do you have clarity on how to submit a ticket? To what extent do you agree that the instructional video was clear and concise? Do you know the expected procedure? And to what extent do you agree that job aid, et cetera? So very clear and concise close-ended questions. And then here's an example of the types of responses we got. So yes, I learned something new. 4, strongly agree, right? So you can see how we can take that data and then measure it, and then again, provide that quantitative kind of data to our sponsors to make sure we're hitting those objectives. So in addition to the quantitative data, which is lovely, we also like to collect some qualitative data. So those are questions that are more open-ended. They might be presented as text boxes so that people can type in their own response. These types of questions provide insight and details that we otherwise might not be able to collect, and stuff we may not have even thought to ask. So on screen are some examples of the types of qualitative questions we might ask. So if you learned something new, tell us what that was. Have you shared these resources with others? If so, tell us about that. What 2 adjectives would you use to describe the training? And do you have any additional comments? So again, it can be a little scary to open yourself up to these qualitative questions, but in the end, you might gain some insight that you otherwise wouldn't have attained. So these are the kinds of examples of answers we get. So I never knew everyone had a login. I shared the material with my staff. It was informative and useful, or, yes, please have additional meetings. So again, that kind of feedback that you wouldn't normally receive. So you don't know if you don't ask. All right, so today we're focusing on specifically the design of the survey, so how to write it in a way that's effective and logical. And while we're not going to actually take you into a survey tool to create one, we did want to point out just some basic question types that are available to you in whatever survey tool you're using. So in this particular example, we're showing types of questions that are available in Google Forms. You could use Microsoft Forms, you could use SurveyMonkey. They all have these same types of questions. So for your quantitative questions, you could do multiple choice or checkboxes or a dropdown. Or in Google Forms, you also have a linear scale, multiple choice grid or tick box grid. So lots of choices available for you, those quantitative questions. Similarly, if you're trying to achieve qualitative questions, you can use those short answer or paragraph type question types in order to allow people to give you some more information. So now that you're familiar with the types of questions, let's look at a few kind of tips and tricks from our department. All right, so these are our EPMO survey tips. So number one is that Google Forms and Microsoft Forms are both fabulous options, and what's even more fabulous about them is that they're free, right? So most of you have either Microsoft or Google in your organizations, and so you already have these tools available to you. So they're already in your Google Suite or your Office 365. They also work for both internal and external surveys. So we survey our own project teams. We also survey our district partners, and it works for everybody. You can decide if you want your surveys to be anonymous or not. We really take that on a case-by-case basis, if we should record the names or it should be anonymous. Again, you know your target audience, you know your organization, so you know what's going to be a best fit for what you're trying to survey. In some cases, people are going to not feel like they can be as honest if their name's attached to it, so you may want it to be anonymous. And at the same time, if you're collecting information and you want to be able to reach out to people and get more information, you might need to collect that contact information. So up to you on whether or not you want to do that or not. But the one thing we very much recommend is that you design it kind of like on paper first. So we use a survey template, which is just a Word doc, and we share the document for review. It becomes part of the project artifacts, and we can use that for similar projects in the future. So we don't have to start from scratch. We kind of take that and edit to meet the needs of the new project. So again, we have a survey template. It's in Word. It can help you get organized on paper. It's got 6 simple sections. So it's got a section for the survey links, the survey name, the opening text, the questions, and a thank you message. And the thank you message, varies, or the settings and stuff vary by which software you're using. This is not in the website that we're going to show you later, but if you are interested in this survey, please put your name in the chat and we will make sure we get you a copy. Okay, so starting at the top, you're going to see there's 2 sections to store links. So at least in Microsoft Forms, there's a link to email or publish, and then there's a link for the survey owners specifically. So link 1 is distended, is for your use to share. And link 2 is just for the owners only for like settings and stuff. So you want to make sure you're always sending out the right link. It's helpful to save them in the documents. You can always get back to them later. Again, we create a lot of surveys and a lot of forms, and so it's nice to be able to circle back and find those pretty easily. Next is the survey name. This is what's going to show at the top of the screen. So you want to make sure that you're typing exactly what your name will of your survey will be. So it's what people are going to see. You want to make sure it makes sense, right? So if it's for your Adobe Sign project, make sure it says that, and that, not something generic, so that people again know what they're filling out. All right, next you're going to see the opening text. We really recommend that you write a purpose and time frame and contact info for the survey. Again, purpose you can pull straight out of your charter, right? What was the purpose of your project? And you're just measuring whether or not you met those objectives. How long they have to complete the survey. Definitely recommend you make it time bound, right? If you give people 2 weeks for a survey, when are they going to complete the survey? Right, the day before the surveys due, right? So think about how much time people need. And definitely give them a deadline. If you leave it open-ended, people will just pretty much never do it. So in addition to the time frame, make sure you give them some contact information so that if they have questions about it, they know who to reach out to. All right, so that's a little bit about the survey setup. Let's talk about the questions. This is part of the doc where you can write all of your survey questions. We like to include the item type, like is it a drop down or a multiple choice and so on. And you'll want to list the choices people will have for those closed-ended questions. So, for example, question 1 is which division are you in? And it might be a drop down. And so you'd want to list what's going to be in that drop down. We like to use, again, multiple choice. Generally you're going to put those as radio buttons and longer lists for drop downs. You might use a Likert scale on a scale from 1 to 4. We don't generally, we try to be careful with things like neutral or NA because they're not particularly informative. You might want to use the text box again for those open-ended questions, and you have to kind of think about which questions you want to be required. So also you may want to have some questions that are just optional. So again, just all things to consider as you're building out your surveys. Critical piece that sometimes may get overlooked is make sure take a couple minutes and just write a nice thank you message. You can customize these. It's a nice touch. It's displayed on the screen after the person submits the survey. And then lastly, we like to take a screenshot of whatever settings we have for that particular survey. So then it's saved. So then when you go to do the next survey, you're not like, wait, how did we do that? Boom, it's right there. You can already see what you put as your thank you, what settings you use, so you can reuse that for the next survey. So again, just saves you, a couple minutes of time as you're moving into your next one. So I know that was a lot about surveys. If you have any questions about surveys, go ahead and throw them in the chat and I will address them. And if I don't get to them right now, go ahead and click that Padlet link below and I will get to it after the session. I agree. Surveys will get done 5 minutes before they're due, 100%. So again, just keep that in mind. Sometimes we think we need to give people a month to fill out a survey. If it's a small survey, keep it time bound. That people like working to deadlines. So, all right, a couple last minute best practices that we advise. These came from Qualtrics, Pew Research, and SurveyMonkey. So this isn't us. This is research based. So make sure you define a clear, attainable goal for your survey. As you guys said, you guys hate generic, rambling. You want to know what the point is and what you're trying to accomplish for your survey. 2, don't let your survey get too long, right? Y'all have heard of that too long didn't read. Same goes for surveys. If it's too long, if you're asking the same questions over and over again, you're going to lose people. You got to keep it short and sweet. It's kind of like, creating a YouTube video. You got to keep them kind of short and sweet and moving on. So be really thoughtful and really think about which questions you really need to ask. What's most important? This is another interesting one that you may not have thought of, but I did see some of you put in the chat, like you don't ask leading questions. I think you guys phrased it as negative, but it could be leading questions as positive too. Like, don't you love our support team? Right? Kind of a leading question. You might change that into a Likert scale. To what degree are you satisfied with our support team on a scale from 1 to 4, right? And don't ask double-barreled questions. So this one's can be challenging, right? How would you rate the quality of our product and our support? So that's really 2 questions, right? So somebody might love your quality, but not like your support or vice versa. So you want to give them the opportunity to evaluate both independently. And then if you need to ask more personal questions, save them for the end. Let people kind of build up. It's easier to share kind of safer things. And if you need them to share something a little more personal, save it towards the end as they're kind of opening up a little bit. And then this can't be understated. Preview and test your survey before you send it out, right? Find a friend, find a project team member, have them test your survey, look for typos, make sure you're sending the right link, all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that you're sending out a polished professional survey. So those are just some fun survey tips. Did see a question, do you provide a summary of survey results back to staff? Yes, we do. We're going to be talking about that coming up next. So thank you for the segue. All right, so now we're going to talk about our final report and our presentation to our staff. So our goal with our final report is that we can present to our project sponsors and our steering committee, a nice overview of how the project went. So this is set up in 4 parts. Again, if you want these slides, so my entire presentation is in a PDF on the conference link in Sched. So you don't have to take screenshots. This whole presentation is available to you. And then if you need resources that we haven't provided, again, you can put that in the chat or you can email us at epmo@sdcoe.net and we'll make sure we get these to you. But in our project overview, we like to have slides for our survey, our project overview, our survey results, our lessons learned, and our next steps. And that all goes into our final report in PowerPoint that we share back out to our sponsor, our steering committee if we have one, and our stakeholders if we want to do that. So in this particular section, this is an example of our project overview. So when we start our presentation with our sponsor steering committee, we just provide a high-level overview of the project. So we want to tell the story, talk about the why. Again, don't need to reinvent the wheel, folks. This comes straight out of your project charter. So, right, you pull that project charter out of your file repository and boom, there's your why. There's your goals and objectives, right? Your alignment, your project team members, what you said you were going to deliver. It's all right there. You just pull it out of your charter and plop it into your PowerPoint. And again, what you see here is just an example. This in particular one is from our ServiceNow education project. yours doesn't have to look exactly like this, but as we go, focus on you really want to focus on the content, not necessarily how it looks. Like get your content solid, and then you can go back and make it pretty. So after the introductory portion, you want to again pull out those survey results, right? So we just conducted this beautiful survey, and we were really thoughtful in our questions. So we want to share those results. So you don't want to just share the numbers. You want to put some analysis behind it. So what did the survey tell us, right? Another tip is if our survey yielded lots of comments, we want to kind of comb through those and categorize them into different themes. So in our presentation, we can speak to those themes. You can even pull out a few choice quotes if you ask those qualitative questions, and then they can illustrate kind of the value of those themes. So you want to choose responses that kind of help tell the story of your project. They also don't all have to be positive. So if somebody gave you constructive feedback, that also helps tell the story of any challenges that you faced along the way and areas you might want to improve for the next project. So again, Risa's 2 cents. Don't shy away from sharing the bad. Share it with your sponsors so that they know, here's what went wrong. Here's what we're going to do better next time. And so that you're communicating what you need to take into the next project. It could be things like we didn't have enough time for training. We didn't have enough time for testing. We needed more resources on the project. That's all good stuff for your sponsors to know so that when you start the next project, you make sure you're building those in. If you choose to include all the comments, you can always hide that slide during the presentation, but have it the information later in the file. So again, just an example, feel free to do what you want, but this is kind of the way we do this in our organization. And then lastly, we like to keep a portion of the presentation for the lessons learned. So again, might be similar to the survey data. This is our opportunity to share, what worked well, where we can make improvements, and really what we're proud of. Like, you all as managers or as leaders of project teams, you want to hear what went well. You want to hear where there's room for improvement, but you also want to hear what your teams are proud of. So you might get lots of comments. You might want to comb through those and kind of categorize them. And then speak to those themes. And again, don't be afraid to share that constructive feedback. It's how we learn and grow. And remember, our goal is that continuous improvement. A famous person once said, remember, if we don't learn from past mistakes, we're bound to repeat them, right? Okay, and then another portion that you can include in your final presentation is kind of a next steps or what's left slide. So you want to share with the sponsor and steering committee any additional activities that you need to do. So might be stuff that's pending, the date of your celebration, could be enhancements that have come out that you want, enhancement requests that have come since your go live. It's also a great place to just invite questions or comments since it's kind of the end of your presentation. So speaking of questions, go ahead. If you have any questions about this final report thing, go ahead and put it in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to keep moving forward. Okay. Also, just a quick note as far as our order of operations, you want to present your final report prior to conducting your celebration, because that way, if your sponsor has all this great information, they can share it at your celebration. So just a little order of operations thing to keep in mind. Speaking of, let's talk about that celebration. Y'all ready to party? All right. So thank you. 1 thumbs up for partying. I know it's after lunch. There we go. There's my party people. All right. All right. So what you're seeing on screen, this was for our big unified communications project. So this was our rollout of Microsoft Teams and new phones for our entire organization. So we happened to do an Aloha themed celebration because, yes, thank you, Anthony, partay. All right. So this particular celebration was because one of our core project team members started thinking about ideas for celebrating. And one of our analysts said, man, I wish we could celebrate in Hawaii. And we're like, aha. So we had created a PowerPoint that included feedback from all of our stakeholders. The team members could hear the direct impact of their work. You all know Terry Loftus. He was our project sponsor, and he spoke, and he definitely had the best Hawaiian outfit ever for this celebration. So we used Teams for this. We had each team member or team was acknowledged collectively, And at the end, we did a fun music guessing game where we played 8 phone related songs. So you can see we like to have songs that are related to our themes, right? In this particular session, we had I Just Called to Say I Love You by Stevie Wonder and Call Me by Blondie. And then when we ended, we took a group picture. So it was a lot of fun, short and sweet, but everybody who was on the project team felt acknowledged and felt like they got to be kind of put a capstone on this before we moved on to the next latest and greatest project, right? So it's a kind of good way to leave a good feeling that you take into your next project. All right, so let's take a look at a few celebration best practices. So as you're thinking about these, again, open in your, yeah, no, call me maybe. Yes, that was one of them too. In the chat, go ahead and tell me what would make you feel good at a celebration? So as you're thinking about going to for celebration, whether it's virtual or in person, what would make you feel good? Recognition, being recognized, shout outs, hearing how we contributed, kudos, acknowledgement, end result, positive impact, food, I'm with you. Food is always good. Relax. Yes, pizza. Somebody's still thinking about my first session this morning. Okay. Time was worth it, reached our goals. A day off. Yes, reaching your goals, food, happy hour. Yes. Sharing the positive impact. Recognition, games, food. Yes. All great. Absolutely. 100% with you guys. Day off. Golf day. Yes. Can't guarantee those, but yes, really, your celebration, again, should be after the final presentation. You want to invite everybody who worked on the project. You want to keep it short and make it fun. It's really not about the PowerPoint. It's really about acknowledging the team's efforts, having a quick game or short activity, just to keep people engaged. And make sure that that you kind of do a high level overview because not everybody remembers all the details of the project. And then of course, absolutely invite your sponsor to share a few words. And then also keep in mind when you're recognizing some folks, I saw a lot of recognition in there. Keep in mind that not everybody likes to be recognized publicly. So kind of keep in mind your project teams and how they like to be acknowledged and celebrated, and then use that when you plan your celebrations. So for example, if it's a really big project, we may not call out folks individually. We might call out like the testing team and the training team. Yeah, particularly in IT, right? Not all of your folks like to be publicly acknowledged. So kind of keep that in mind and know your audience when you're planning these things so that you make sure that they're leaving with these feelings that you would want them to have, right? You want to carry that positivity. All right, moving on. So I was showing you some virtual examples that we've been doing in the last 2 years during the pandemic, but this is an example of an in-person way to celebrate. So in the past, we purchased, coffee and treats out of pocket. This one was for a huge PeopleSoft upgrade that was happening, and we had a lot of users involved. So Perry and our colleague Flora, who's now retired, decorated a celebration cart with words like communication and teamwork and planning. And then they wheeled the goodies around to all the people who were working at their desks. And everyone loved getting a little treat, right? It wasn't pizza, but it was coffee and donuts, and really appreciated the recognition and the thanks. So again, just another example of it doesn't have to be a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting with a PowerPoint. It could be a coffee cart with donuts. We also did a celebration recently after our project management academy where we did meet for pizza. Funny enough, there's a pizza theme today. Pizza and happy hour, and we met in person for the first time since the pandemic to celebrate together. So lots of ways to celebrate, lots of ways to acknowledge and appreciate your teams. All right, so we did our lessons learned, our survey, our final report. We're celebrated. Are you guys exhausted? I'm exhausted. This was a lot of work, right? So now we're going to go into that final sign off with our sponsor. Okay, so let's take a look at these last 4 boxes. So question in budgeting terms, we paid for the Coffee and donuts is out of pocket. That's not using public funds. So just want to be clear. That's managers spending their own money to acknowledge their teams. Okay. So after we've done all the celebrations and all the fun stuff, now we're gonna archive our project. So we want to identify if we need to move any archive files or create a new site. If you're leaving everything where it's at, make sure everyone on the project is aware. And if you're going to archive or move anything like project files or meetings, if you're using monday.com or a different task board, you want to tell everybody where you're putting everything. It's very important that the project team knows how to get back to everything in case they need it to refer to in the future. So when you sign off with your sponsor, make sure you explain if it's been archived. Next thing you want to do is look at any other close items. So you might be handing over or transferring the project ownership. If there's any budgeting things that you need to do or invoices to process, you want to make sure that you're taking care of those as well. So like, for example, in a lot of cases, our projects, we are closing out the project implementation and then we are handing over to, for example, support, let's say. So there'll be a handoff with support. And then we want to sign off with our sponsor. So we want to set up one final meeting to review what we delivered and walk through all of the completed closeout items. Because tell me, has this ever happened to you where you thought your project was done and then a month later somebody comes in and says, hey, what happened to such and such feature, right? Hey, I thought we were going to do this. So this formal sign off can really help avoid that because again, you've documented what was in scope, what was out of scope, what was delivered. If you've collected any enhancement requests post go live, you can say, yep, that's an enhancement and that's a separate project. So that's another good thing to kind of keep in mind because again, once we go live with one thing, people see possibilities of other things that they might want. And it's really important and critical to make sure that you're able to communicate what was in the scope of your project. And if there's other things people want to add, that those are enhancements in a separate project. So, then lastly, you get to celebrate because you did it. You got through your project, right? I know you guys, a lot of you were saying time off. That is actually kind of critical. And if you have the ability to do so, I highly recommend you give folks just a little bit of a breather before you throw them on the next project. Particularly time to just even process those lessons learned, celebrate those successes. Again, too many times we're jumping from one project to the next and we never really take that time to kind of just take a breath before we jump into the next thing. So definitely want to keep that kind of front of mind for y'all. All right, so congratulations, we have completed the closure phase, right? Everybody give yourselves a round of applause. That was amazing. So want you to go back to your printed copy of the conference map. And again, we looked at lessons learned, stakeholder survey, final report, and celebration. So please mark yourself on a scale from 1 to 4 about how comfortable you feel with those sections. So again, this morning we did all of the planning forest. Right before lunch, we did the execution mountains. And now after lunch, even though we're all tired, we did closure castle. All right. So we ended a little bit early. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and I will be happy to address them for you.
Marisa, there was a comment. It's like you're talking like people only work on one project at a time. Can you give some input on working on multiple projects using this process?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, agreed, right? We all have full-time jobs plus projects, multiple projects. It's actually a good thing if you're in a position to manage how many projects your staff have. It's definitely a good thing to consider. People only have so many hours in a day. So if you're going to be working on multiple projects simultaneously, you have to realize that given your limited staff, we all have limited staff, right? There's only going to be so much they can accomplish. So you either have to do fewer projects so that they can focus and get them done faster, or if you're going to do a lot of projects at once, they're all going to take longer because people only have so many resources available to them. So again, if you're working on multiple projects simultaneously, that's even more reason why having good project planning and good tracking and status meetings and communication and everything we talked about all day today is so critical. And again, like I was saying, so we're just coming off a huge recruiting and tools upgrade project on the PeopleSoft side. And so I've been heavily communicating with my project sponsor to try and give all of my project team members a little bit of a break before we jump into the next big project, because people have, PTO that they need to burn. They're kind of mentally exhausted and they just need a break before they move into their next project. So I'm a firm believer that, we need to take care of our mental health as well as getting our projects done. So um, okay. Saw a question in the chat. Any suggestions when working with stakeholders that are literally children? I would kind of have to know more. Maybe in the Padlet, tell me a little bit more about what some of your challenges are, and be happy to talk to you about that. My guess is you need to, communicate at their level. If you have expectations of them, you may need to, you know, adjust how you communicate to match their level. So I'm curious to hear more about that, because they're definitely a stakeholder group, and so it'd be fun to see what challenges you're experiencing and how we can help with that. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any other questions, I just want to say thank you all for joining my session. And if you have questions I didn't get to, please put them in the Padlet and I will take a look at them. And then you will get a nice little break over the next few minutes. And then we will see you at 2 o'clock for a fun session to hear about how Rick Roberts and Grossmont School District implemented project management in their organization. So should be a really enlightening session. Thank you all for sticking with me today. Appreciate you. It's been a pleasure working with you, and we'll see y'all later.